Hello, welcome and an excellent evening. We are back with another Commodore floppy drive. It's a massive thing, again similar to the CBM 8050 that we had before. The CBM 8050 being the single side disk drive for the Commodore PET with 100 TPI disk drives delivering, what is it? I think 500 kilobytes per disk side or something. So 1 megabyte combining two floppy drives, or 2 megabytes if you swap the disks around, if you use the back sides as well. There's actually a floppy disk in here. Yeah, this is the model 4040, which is very much related to the 1541. They use very similar format, and the disk from one drive can be read on the other, but they are not write compatible because I think there's 1 byte somewhere in the header or something that is different. So you can exchange data, but each drive has to write to their own disk. So this is actually a bit of a fascinating thing to be used when you want to transfer data from a C64 to a PET and vice versa, without using modern tools, so to speak. And it's quite an interesting device in and of itself. However, the one that I got here is not working. The disk drives do not work, and I think it's due to the analog board. The digital board seems to be fine. From what I can tell, it boots up pretty nicely. But as you can see, this drive here, the drive 1, was modded. And we'll open this up now to have a look inside, and I'll show you what I mean. First of all, let's have a look at the digital section, which is the big main board that is mounted upside down in the top case of the drive, which is the same, basically the same layout, or mostly the same layout as the 8050. It is very, very similar. You do have the power supply section on the left with two 12-volt regulators and one 5-volt regulator. That is quite typical indeed. Then you have a bunch of ICs that we already know. I have to take a look a little bit. There's a 6522 VIA chip over here. There is a, I have to look around, a 6504, 6502 related CPU, the 6504 having much less address pins, being able to address, I don't know, something like 2 or 4K of RAM only. This is, I think, the CPU that handles the GCR decoding, but I'm not 100% sure. There is also a 6502, I think, down here. There are ROMs in here, plus a couple of specialized R-riots. I think this is an R-riot, and regular riots down here for the other CPU. And yeah, so basically, again, it's a 2 CPU setup, but it uses the 6504, which is a little less common, quite a bit less common than, for example, the 6507 in the Atari 2600, or the 6502, which is super common in a lot of machines. So if this dies, it's a bit harder to replace. I guess there are most probably adapter boards for the 6502. To make it a 6504, the package is of course larger, but you can basically tie the missing pins to ground, I would assume, most probably, hopefully. And then you can basically drop in a 6502, I think. Would make sense, definitely. The R-Riot is of course also hard to replace, but there are adapter boards for putting a regular Riot with a ROM board, with a ROM inside. But this is all pretty fine and dandy. This is booting up correctly, so I think we don't have an issue there. Where we do run into problems is in the drive itself. You can't see that, but maybe I should relocate this a little bit. Yeah, here you can see there's a cutout here where the write protect sensor would have been. The drives are a little bit dirty, so they will need cleaning if I were to use them. I think this drive might actually be okay, the drive 0 unit. So we might want to keep that. But this I want to replace, I think. Plus, I want to replace the analog board because I think the error most probably lies somewhere on here. Because there is a big splotch of corrosion with some damage to the PCB. The components themselves look visually okay, but we don't get anything from the drive. The drive tries to seek and so on. I think that is working. But other than that, and everything is spinning, it does not work. So I want to get a pristine drive in here. And I was so lucky that someone had a spare 4040 lying around where the main board was missing, and I think the transformer was very corroded. Our transformer looks very nice and shiny, so that is in good order. There's a little bit of yellowing due to, I think the previous owner was a smoker, lots of heavy smoking, and that will leave lots of grime on the device, but we can clean it off, that is fine. The case is still in pretty nice shape. Anything that is corroded or something on the metal, we can fix in time, but that's not my main priority here. So what I want to do is a full swap with the extra drives that I acquired, and we can compare maybe the analog board and see if there are any missing or modded components, because at least the write protect here was changed. There's an extra LED here, an extra hole in the front, and that looks very suspicious. The drives themselves can still be used for replacement parts, the motors, the read-write heads, and maybe some other parts could still be used. So I will keep them. The latches on the front and the front plates could be used partially at least. I don't want to use the beat up one here, but yeah. So I will fetch the other replacement drives and we'll have a look at those. They also do need some cleaning. And here are the two replacement drives. They are in much nicer condition, although they are quite dirty, so I will give them a proper cleaning. Which makes sense as these drives are approaching 45 years or so. I have to check. This one drive here is from 1980, so it's, yeah, at least 45 years old. And this one here, let's see if I can figure out a date code. Actually, no, I can't find a proper date code. They are all using very weird date codes, I must say. But we don't have the corrosion or the destruction that I saw on the other board, so I hope that this will perhaps work better. There might be other issues, of course, that are plaguing the other drive, but these should work relatively nicely. So what I want to do is I want to get both drives cleaned properly and then put them inside of the other case of, I mean, I only have one case, and test them out. We will test the read heads with our multimeter to see that the heads are not broken, but I think they are fine. They were tested by the previous owner. So yeah, let's disassemble them, and I think I'm gonna start with this drive here, because if we have this thing here running, we should be able to test the drive. Drive unit 0 in the original should be okay to use, probably. And this one here has the analog board on it, even though it's drive unit 1. The LED popped inside, so I have to push that back in and secure it with a plastic ring. But other than that, yeah, it's mostly only dirt. So yeah, it's already getting grimy fingers. The idea here is that we'll take off the analog board and then also the front and clean everything. This here probably with some soapy water and an anti-static brush. leave it to dry overnight, and meanwhile clean all the other parts. Oh boy, this drive almost drove me crazy. It is working now, mostly fine without issues. There are sometimes issues with the reset, and I'm not sure why. It will sometimes not boot up correctly but flash an error message. In the beginning, it wouldn't work at all correctly. Where do I begin? First of all, the drive mechanisms have partially been replaced. This one here is the replacement mechanism, the two that I had in the beginning as a replacement for the bodged one, basically. And this is working fine. The other drive, which you see over there, was the other replacement drive. It has a mechanical issue where it is misaligned, the stepper motor is misaligned. And when I eventually got it working, it couldn't read the whole disk. So I swapped in one of the old drives because this one is still working. I cleaned it to the best of my abilities. There's still a little bit of nicotine grime in there. Plus the case is pretty yellowed from the nicotine compared, to example, to the 8050. But the main issue was that at first it was trying to work, but the drive in this position couldn't move its stepper motor, so the head wouldn't move, which was weird. Even when I swapped the two drives around, the stepper motor wouldn't move. I debugged the analog board without much success. It looked like something was off on one of the phases. The stepper motor has 4 phases driven by 4 little transistors here and 2 inverters. But it turned out the problem was coming from upstream. And there is a MOS 6522 VIA chip here, which drives those inverters directly, and those drive the transistor, and that again really turns the stepper motor, so to speak. And the one phase didn't come out of the VIA chip, so I thought maybe it's a bad VIA chip. So I replaced it with a different one, then it worked one time and then stopped working again. And I was, how can that happen? Is something destroying everything? And then more weird stuff started to happen. When I did a reset on the drive, it would throw blinking error messages. I used Piers Finlayson's great and awesome OneROM with the IEEE diagnostics in there, and it would also say SRAM failure. So I socketed the SRAMs here and swapped them out because, I mean, they are MOS branded, and MOS branded SRAMs and TTL logic usually dies. But it turns out they were fine, so I swapped them back in. I also swapped this back in. Then I measured with the oscilloscope, thought I can test the voltages, the 5 volt, because I only checked it with the multimeter and that was fine, 5 volts. And it turned out, well, there seems to be a lot of ripple at 2 megahertz, which is weird, which is twice the clock of the system. So maybe some harmonics or something. Really a lot, 1.5 volts peak to peak or something. And that would be enough to cause all kinds of issues. But I'm not sure that was actually the issue, because to me, it seems even now I have lots of ripple. Even though I also replaced the 5 volt regulator for a cooler running Mr. Floppy kind of regulator. It did seem to help, but I'm not sure if it was just coincidental. I also replaced the electrolytics, which are on the side of these regulators. The 12 volt line actually looks totally fine. There's almost no ripple. We do have the big filter caps here for the secondary side of the transformer. Maybe they were the issue and they slowly reformed. I'm totally not sure. So I do see fine voltage with very little ripple coming out of the regulator here at this connector, because this is these are the rectifier diodes, and You can grab the 5 volts directly from here, so that's looking good. Over here I see quite a bit of ripple, but there's the oscillator circuit also. So no matter where I probe on the VCC pins, I see quite a bit of ripple. But the drive is working. I can test this, but it sometimes doesn't reset. Maybe there's something with the reset circuit, I don't know, or one of the chips is indeed maybe a little bit off. Now it booted correctly, as you can see. It did stop the motors. When I turn on the pad, it will reboot, and it resets correctly this time, which is fine. So, all worked. Now we are in basic version 4, and we can do something like directory, and it will hopefully work. And indeed, it does work. We have some save games and Zorg 2 over here. And now we can actually maybe have a look at how this thing is behaving. So basically, everything is original except for the fact that I socketed a couple of chips that I thought were bad. I replaced the 3 electrolytics over here, and I replaced the 5 volt regulator, which is a good thing, I think, because this is really getting hot with the 5 volt regulator. The 12 volt, they don't run that high a load all the time, so they run a little bit cooler. Only when the disk is spinning, they are really delivering some current. But this way, this thing will already run cooler. In the future, I might replace these with Mr. Floppy 12 volt regulators as well. So let's see. But for now, this seems to work, and we can have a little bit of a look on the pad and see how it behaves. All right, something that I wanted to show you is the mechanism that I said is misaligned. There is a relatively large plastic disc attached to the stepper motor with a spiral pattern. And there is kind of like a bumpy thing that rides this groove basically, and when this turns, the read head will move up and down. This is how these things work. And when the head bump comes, it drives this thing all the way to the end, and it will catch onto this metal part here, and that will be the end stop basically. And I think this disc is in this position slightly misaligned. I think this drives too far back maybe, because when it goes forward at some point it can't go any further and slides out of the groove or isn't moved further, and it can't read the last sector. So the first couple of tracks are fine, but the last couple of tracks can't be read on this one. And also during formatting, you see the last 3 steps don't get made basically. So there is some misalignment here. I think this can be fixed, but it requires a little bit of work and probably quite a lot of disassembly of this whole part. Maybe not, maybe you can adjust this with these 2 screws, because usually you can twist this a little bit to adjust the start or the track 0 position. Anyway, I will definitely save this, because it is a good drive otherwise. And yeah, we'll keep that. But let's take a look at this monstrosity. Currently we have the interpreter in drive 1 and the other thing in drive 0, which we can actually leave like that. This is the bit shifter interpreter that I modified. We can load the program from drive 1, and we can even load the story file. You can't see drive 1 right now, but it has been lit up and it's already done. The drives are faster than the normal IEC serial drives. And it says here Zorg 1, which is incorrect. We want to load Zorg 2. And also we want to load it from drive 1. So you can just write 1:, which is determining which drive it's loading from, and then zorg2.z3. And I found it, and it's now reading in the story file as much as it can into the 32 kilobytes. I do have the soft ROM installed, which is 8K, I think, of extra RAM from 9000 hex to AFFF hex. This will be used as a kind of disk cache, where red sectors are cached, and often accessed sectors will hopefully not have to be read twice. Now it's creating, now it's reading in the disk cache, it's reading a couple of tracks, and then it's making a map of where on the disk each of the bytes basically, or blocks of the story file are, because we are reading from a sequential file and the disk drives don't have a proper seek, so to speak. But as you can see, it's working fine. And there we are. Zorg2, the Wizard of Phobos, is running, and it seems to work. Now let's try and see if drive 0 works. We can do that by loading a saved game from unit 8. This is currently jumped as unit 8, same as the 8050, but it's turned off, so that's fine. You could, of course, jumper one drive to device 9 and one to device 8, and that should be fine. And then we input as a file name 0:test2. That was my latest save game, I think. And it's trying to access it. It is loading the game. And with a bit of luck, this should be working. Yeah, this is just a glitch. If we type look, it should say that we are in the gazebo. There's a gazebo in the midst of a formal garden. It is cool and restful here. A tea table adorns the center of the gazebo. And we should have quite a few things in our inventory. Yeah, we are carrying a lot of stuff. Lamp, a sword, a matchbook, and so on. So we can play interactive fiction games off of the 4040, which still looks a bit beat up. It has rusty spots on the case, etc. But it did have a long and arduous life, I would say. But for the time being, I think this means this drive is fixed. I didn't fix much. Mostly I replaced this drive because it was totally, not working. I think there is a problem on the analog board of that drive, plus the write protect switch was missing. And I would love to restore that drive as well. And I want to repair the other drive 0 unit, of course, and make it a proper replacement. It would fit better here, and it would also be a little bit more clean. But as I said, it is definitely misadjusted, and I'm not sure how to properly adjust that without an analog calibration disk. With the digital disks that I have, it will be not that easy. Probably you could write a program or a ROM to tell you on which track it is after a head bump, but it will be more difficult than on a 1541. We have proper alignment tools using digital good disks, basically. Yeah. But other than that, I think this is fixed. I am thinking about replacing those two electrolytic caps on the analog board, but it does behave fine, and the problem does not lie on the analog board, because I get the random reboot errors also if I detach everything related to the drive max. But yeah, that's what you get for using a drive from 1980, probably in early 1980, but a lot of stuff in here is also from 1979. So we are approaching 47 years of this thing, almost half a century. And I think that's already pretty good. What I also would love is to get all the nicotine grime off of there and get the case not to be that yellowed. And I'm wondering, and maybe you have an idea, how can we get this yellowed case back to normal, basically. I mean, what I can do is I can strip the paint and repaint it with can of spray or something, which is more close to this here, to this grayish white. But that's a lot of work, obviously. I wonder if there's a chemical procedure to take away the yellowing from nicotine, basically. I'm not sure. Also, the mainboard could use a washing, but there are some rare chips on there, and it's currently working quite fine, that I don't want to stress it too much. If I were to do this, it would also make sense to replace the single wipe sockets with proper ones. I do think I reseated all of the ICs that are socketed and put in some deoxit, but maybe that was not enough due to the grime that we see. But yeah, other than that, I think this is a very nice disk drive, a nice companion to the 8050. More in line with the 1541, since it only can store roughly 170 kilobytes per disk, whereas this can store 500 kilobytes per disk, so huge amount of difference between the two. But it's more likely that during the time when you would have bought this machine, you would have bought the 4040. I'm not even sure the 8050 was out by then. So the 3016 and especially the 4016 or 4032 would have been sold with the 4040, most probably. This one probably also was quite a bit more expensive due to the more expensive mechanisms in there. But yeah, it's a very nice and interesting device. Please leave a comment if you're also owner of one of the IEEE drives or you're interested in this stuff. Follow me on Mastodon as usual. You can find me on chaos.social/@root42. Leave a comment here, share, like, and subscribe, all that stuff. And I'll see you in the next video. Bye.